On today's episode.
In that whole area of procreation, I think we're going to see some pretty dramatic changes. I think CRISPR is going to be another area where we're going to run into some very difficult bioethical issues between the line that's drawn between curative and enhancement. I mean, we're already facing that now, when you have people who are suspended from sports for using steroids or something like that, where they have an unfair advantage. Well, CRISPR holds the potential of giving you all sorts of advantages.
Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. People today face many opportunities and struggles when it comes to issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. We're here to bring a fresh biblical perspective to these issues and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischmann and Jeff Samuelson. And this month, we are celebrating the anniversary of Christian Life Resources. Bob, what year is it?
This would be 42.
42. Okay, good. All right. With anniversaries, too, a lot of times we think about things in the past and things that we've achieved over the course of, for Christian Life Resources for these 42 years. But we also, too, want to look to the future as well. But thinking about the past first, Bob, can you fill us in on maybe just some of the highlights or things that maybe even you and the staff here have been kind of reflecting on this year for the anniversary?
Perhaps one of the big things that happened is we had the U.S. Surgeon General speak for a convention. I'm trying to remember the year. I think it was 1984 that C. Everett Koop spoke for us. I just remember it was held at Wisconsin Lutheran High School. But we had gone in with Marquette University. They were looking to bring him in as a speaker. And so we kind of split the plane flight and stuff. We weren't allowed to pay him because he was employed by the government. But it was a high point. We felt pretty good about that. Kind of got into a cycle of high-profile speakers, which, of course, made for big conventions. But it really, the organization took off when we established full-time staffing in 1988, which is why we have full-time staffing. We're up until 1988, from 1983 to 88, we were all volunteer and pretty much getting hardly anything done because, I was a parish pastor in a mission church. The other board members were all full-time employed in different things. And we had great ideas and no time to do it. And so when we got the funding to go full-time, well, then we started doing things. And right now, to be honest, I think we're really looking acknowledging the anniversary by looking forward. Mm-hmm. We've got some, big plans of what we want to do.
Christian Life Resources, I think it is interesting how it did get its, formation really maybe is, I don't know if that's the best word, but its start in the pro-life movement. And but over the years, you've taken on a lot more issues than just the abortion issue, too.
Well, that's part of the reason why I want to mention Koop is when Koop spoke at our convention, it was on the heels of the 1982 baby doe situation in Bloomington, Indiana, where a child was born with an opening in the esophagus, so the child couldn't be fed, couldn't take food without that being repaired, and that could have been repaired. But the family decided the child would not lead a worthy life and decided not to authorize the surgery, so the child was put in the back end of the neonatal care unit. And I remember at our convention, Koop made the statement, it's a small leap in logic to going from taking life inside of the womb to taking life outside of the womb. And that probably would be a good umbrella statement for how the organization began to expand. I took the office of National Director on July 1st, 1988. I think it was within 5 days or 6 days, we had been asked to deal with, is some birth control abortifacient? And then the second non-abortion related issue was a church out in California had a woman who wanted to become a surrogate parent, and should surrogate parenting be a good thing, even though she wasn't married, but she wanted to bear a child for someone else. And then I think the third really big issue was Jack Kevorkian. And what was going on, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, but the head of communications for Wells was Pastor James Schaefer. We called him Jeb Schaefer. And unknown to me, that whenever anybody was asking the synod for what is our position on, and then you fill in the blank, Jeb would always say, well, we now have this organization that can answer. And and I remember we even got a PETA, a request. What is our synod's position on, people for the ethical treatment of animals, and that's when I began to realize that something was afoot. And then Jeb had told me what he had been doing. But there is a common thread that goes from taking life inside of the womb to taking all sorts of life. And that common thread has to do with mankind supplanting God as the authors of their own fate, the authors of their own destiny. And that has really, I think, when I look at it from a staff perspective today, when I look to the future, I think that that's the area, at least for my time remaining in my office, will be to try to keep emphasizing that common thread. We can change the laws, but the laws don't change the hearts. We could protest, but sometimes a picture of an aborted child and all that kind of stuff does have an effect, without a doubt. Sometimes when you see it for the first time, you never realized what was going on. But change, especially God-pleasing change, is only rooted in faith. And faith doesn't happen by flashing up pictures and protesting and changing laws. Faith is the proclamation of the gospel. So I've tried to, in the last few years, very strongly embrace our mission vision statements of trying to use life and family issues as bridges to talk about Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I think it's interesting and a good reminder, too, because I think, even as I sit down here today, I'm like, okay, let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the issues that Christian Life Resources covers. Let's talk about, what we think for the future. But just remembering, like how you're saying, Bob, I mean, it really goes above the issues into how we are going to communicate these concepts in a Christian loving way, and what we are ultimately using these, and like the bridge building, to really use these issues, topics, discussion points to engage people in the gospel.
Well, these are emotional issues. Life and family issues are emotional issues. They're volatile issues, and they are issues in which you can become far more ideological than you could be theological. So, in other words, it's like we're pulling out all the stops to pass this legislation. We're pulling out all the stops to make this statement, to elect this candidate. And those are all good things. And we do personally, my wife and I financially support those efforts. If any of you have heard me speak, I've always mentioned to you, I do think you should be supporting your local Right to Life affiliate. I think Christians should be getting involved in politics and so forth, but you should never lose sight of how real change takes place. And that's a heart ministry. And it pains me when I see even our pastors sometimes sound more ideological than theological. There's a deeper problem than just the fact that a woman wants to take the life of her unborn child. That's systemic of something else going on. And that's where Christians should be, not just the pastor, but all Christians should be, because you all have the gospel, and that's what needs to be happening.
It is interesting, though, just all of the different topics and things that Christian Life Resources covers, too. I know I've told the story before, but just when I first started coming onto CLR and the volunteer role, and okay, Bob, what should I do? Oh, just read the website, Krista. And I was just blown away by, Christian Life Resources Well, who would have thought it has a lot of resources? About 1,000 or so articles that I found when I went on there. That was really my first introduction just to the wide variety of topics that Christian Life Resources covers. And now, I mean, we have just all this information in our podcast too, like the different topics that we've covered over the years now. I mean, anywhere from like IVF to organ donation to birth control, family issues. There's just so many different things that Christian Life Resources has touched on. So I guess, with some of it, like in looking toward the future now, I mean, what other topics are there?
Well, I do see three main areas that are going to, for the remainder of my lifetime, I think are going to really drift front and center. And that would be in the area of procreation, which is just innovations in how to bring about children. There's progress made on artificial wombs. There's progress made on male birth control. There's progress in that whole area of procreation. I think we're going to see some pretty dramatic changes. I think CRISPR is going to be another area where we're going to run into some very difficult bioethical issues between the line that's drawn between curative and enhancement. I mean, we are already facing that now, when you have people who are suspended from sports for using steroids or something like that, where they have an unfair advantage. Well, CRISPR holds the potential of giving you all sorts of advantages, but I also think there's going to be problems there. And then the third thing that gets a lot of attention on the bioethical journals is the role of artificial intelligence. But those are the three that I think you're going to see come up in many different ways. All three of them, I see very positive things coming from them and very scary things.
Without really predicting particular issues or anything like that, I think just more in terms of trends and what's kind of going to be in the background of everything and complicating everything there. I'd like to be optimistic and say everything's going to be getting better, but unfortunately, I don't think there's too much cause for that kind of optimism. What Christians need to be, and an organization like CLR needs to be, is prepared for things to get a lot worse in many respects. Just some of the broad trends in terms of socially, I think that the loneliness and the disconnectedness and the social fragmentation we see now, I think it's just going to get worse. I don't really see signs that it's improving. There's some people, people are calling attention to it and doing certain things, but I don't really see a whole lot that's going to bring people together in the way they used to be together. And a lot of that is driven by technology, which is another area that's going to be driving a lot of stuff. And leaving AI aside for the moment, what we're seeing in terms of people's interactions with tech, is more and more reliance on it for everything, not just to simplify tasks in their lives or to lessen their workload, but also to give them pleasure, to provide company for them, now often not real companionship, and even a sense of identity is coming through, being filtered through technology with online groups, especially on social media. The way people identify according to their amusements, I'm a gamer, those kinds of things. And people will identify, it's like, I'm an early adopter, I'm the kind of person who drives this kind of electric car and things like that. And politically, which is probably what I pay most attention to, sadly, I think that the partisanship and polarization that we see today is just likely to be getting worse and worse as people and politicians just kind of dig in and don't really open up anymore to considering the other side, or maybe I'm wrong on this or anything. And as far as the pro-life and pro-family movements, I think that's eventually going to cause a reckoning of sorts for them. You're going to have to face up to the reality that there are going to be a whole lot of battles that just aren't worth fighting anymore. They could throw as many resources as they wanted at it, and it still wouldn't budge anything politically. So they're going to end up having to turn around and shore up and defend what they already have, what's already theirs, and try to protect that more than getting out to try to do things that are not currently in the pro-life or pro-family column. And I guess one of the other changes is that things that we previously thought of as relatively permanent politically, in terms of the people who are on our side, the people we can count on for support, that has shifted a lot just in the last 5 years. And I think that's also going to be causing this kind of reckoning and a reevaluation of things.
Well, now that I'm thoroughly depressed, Jeff.
Hey, that's what I was aiming for.
Yeah,
kind of a doubter there. I think this is maybe a good transition then with Christian Life Resources too, and the work that can be done. I mean, it sounds like, just from Bob, like from what you explained, and then also just from how Jeff has illustrated things kind of going, that there really is a lot of potential opportunity for Christian Life Resources to really keep going.
I guess, part of it is just like being realistic. When Jesus said, because of the increase of wickedness or lawlessness, the love of most will go cold. Well, all you have to do is sit still for a moment and think about, well, what must that look like? And we think progressively that it should be worse today than it was yesterday, and it'll be worse tomorrow than it is today. And I would say that seems to be fairly accurate. I mean, there were things going on during the time of Christ and the Apostle Paul when they were on earth that were pretty bad. The things of Nero and things of Rome that were going on are bad by our standards. The other thing too, and I just used this reference in a correspondence with someone that had asked a question, and that is, we're told that, sometimes people get to the point of calling good evil and evil good. And so what does that look like? And again, I look around and I'm going, oh my goodness, we're there. Some of the things they're doing. And I think kind of, not at the risk of making you even more depressed, but to get onto Jeff's bandwagon here, and that is, if you are living your Christian faith correctly, and especially when we get into these life and family issues, and you find it's going well for you, I'm pretty convinced you're doing it wrong, because you don't want to be combative when you're standing your ground, because you should always be looking to bridge build. Mm-hmm. But Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. I mean, it's just the reality. And it is funny because when you're trying to navigate a ship, as we try to do at CLR, you're trying to do it with the full awareness that sometimes you feel like you're the captain of the Titanic, is that, except that God still promises his blessing. He still promises to watch over us and to work all things out for good, even the things that look like they're going south in a bad way, that they're going to work out good for his people. And we trust that. But in order for me to do that as the national director, my biggest challenge, like right at this moment, is to get people to recognize there is only one reliable standard of truth, and that is Scripture. Beyond that, everybody's just dealing with opinion. I just wrote an article as part of our Debunk series in which I talk about, there's a section in which I talk about that we literally just surrender objective truth for an opinion that gets the most likes. And somehow I don't know if we're just getting that daft that we begin to believe that just because people agree with me, agree with Scripture. Carl Truman, who's one of my favorite contemporary writers, religious writers, a Presbyterian professor, but he writes this article about, he wrote this little editorial piece where he said, I'm really not interested in your opinion. If I'm wrong on something, if I'm wrong biblically on something, I have no interest in being wrong. Correct me, but correct me based upon an objective authority. If all you're going to do is share with me your opinion, don't waste our time. And the problem with what we have today in our climate today, and that is social media has a way of venerating opinion to the level of objective truth. And we declared, or we sense it to be that, by the number of likes we get and the number of followers we have and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, when you figure that this world is naturally opposed to God, it's hostile to God, I wouldn't find a lot of flattery if a lot of people in the world really get on your bandwagon.
It's funny, like, that you mentioned that too, because I was just thinking every once in a while I read something in scripture that, I mean, maybe I've read 100 times, and I'm just like, wow, that is just so true of now. And it probably was also true back then too, but just I believe it comes from Romans, the do not conform to the ways of this world. And that just really hit me. I mean, again, and just hearing you talk too, Bob, about like how we could get so zapped into what this world tells us is true that we forget what is actually true. And just that whole thing about how, yeah, I mean, we can't just get sucked into this world and what it tells us.
I'll just add going against my own prior statements, a note of optimism, I guess. Just
Thanks, Jeff.
There is still heaven.
Yeah.
There is still heaven.
We've also got to be on the guard, always as Christians against any kind of what I've called Christian fatalism, which is that things are bad. They're always going to be bad. There's just no point. And, well, that's not a biblical attitude. Jesus told us to work. Jesus told us to pray, and he promised that our prayers will be answered. Mm-hmm. And he promised that, when we do the work, there will be fruit. It won't always be the fruit we're looking for, but, just because the general arc of history is heading to bad things and an end doesn't mean that tomorrow necessarily is going to be bad. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be working and praying and speaking and arguing and such, to make tomorrow and next year and the next decade and the next generation better than it is today. And if you look at history, there are countless examples of times when things looked really bad, but largely through the work of Christians, they got better. Maybe not in all ways, but in many ways. And then the new responsibility is to try to maintain what you've got. But there's nothing in Scripture that says you can't have shorter term improvements, even while the general trend of history is toward evil.
A lot of times in staff meetings, I always talk about recalibration, which is what I think CLR is all about. We're trying to basically recalibrate and recalibrate Christians, because kind of going back a little bit to what you were saying, Krista, with being conformed to the world, I think we woefully underestimate how worldly all of us have become, myself included. And I've talked about Revelation 3 before in the church of Laodicea. You do not realize, you say, I'm rich, I don't need a thing. You don't realize you're pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. And I did a deep dive into what does secular history say about Laodicea. And Laodicea said that, first of all, it was very wealthy. It was a kind of a port area and was very wealthy. But they also were very much of, I do my own thing. And it was an earthquake-prone part of Asia Minor. And so they had a big destructive thing, and Rome came in and said, okay, we're going to bring in some people, we're going to do it. And they said, no, we don't want your help. We can do this ourselves. And it seems like that mentality, and that's from secular sources, had infiltrated into the church. And he said, you somehow missed the point. And the point that I have trouble, or I'm struggling with, and getting people to realign to, is that how do you get conformed to the world? Well, the way you get conformed to the world is that their values become your values, their goals become your goals, their treasures become your treasures. And the way you get recalibrated is you got to remind yourself, why was I created in the first place? And Scripture has a very unworldly explanation or answer to that, and that is to honor and glorify God. That is why we exist. We do not exist to get a career. We do not exist to become wealthy, to be happy. We exist to honor and glorify God. And we do that within a career and within, a geographic location and so forth. And when you understand that, it then begins to formulate how you respond to the latest ethical and bioethical challenges that come your way, because you're looking at everything and you begin to say, well, you start out by thinking like the world. What would be good for the world? We've talked about that with CRISPR. I'm not sure the world's ready for that and everything, But really, a Christian says, how do I honor and glorify God through this? How do I honor? And you begin to think about the ethical choices you make in life. I'm dating. Do I have sexual activity? Well, okay, we can talk about the dangers and all that kind of stuff. When we first started, CLR, we were talking about fetal heartbeat and brain waves and fingerprints and fetal development, all that kind of stuff. And we have matured, I think, over the years to talk about why are we here in the first place? I don't destroy life because I can't not find in the destruction of life a way to honor and glorify God. And then I cannot find in being sexually promiscuous, how do I honor and glorify God? So when I'm faced with a decision, do we move in, live together? Do we get married? But it's not just that. Everyone wants to start on the wrong end. They always want to start, what's your position on abortion? What's your position on cohabitation, on IVF and everything? When really the front end is we're talking about honoring and glorifying God. Now, how can I do it? And so CLR really has tried, first of all, to help you understand what's at play in an issue. What does it mean to be a surrogate? What's the mechanisms and the biology and stuff involved? But the fundamental question remains the same. How do I honor and glorify God?
Yeah. Well, so then also thinking about the future of Christian Life Resources, what are maybe some plans for the future?
Well, I know that the board, the CLR board, the National Board for Christian Life Resources, is concerned about succession planning. So I've been doing this for, full-time since 1988. So I've been around a couple of years. And so in that time, I've made a ton of mistakes and hopefully have learned from most of them. And so they're trying to figure out a way, how do we preserve some of that knowledge and then prepare for the future? And I know that we're talking about, eventually soon, within the next couple of years, bringing in new leadership. And I might just be in the background, maybe more writing and something on that. Just start new ways, a new way of thinking and so forth, which I think is always healthy for an organization. I'm a little bit atypical than a lot of people. The way I was thinking this year is dramatically different than I was thinking 3 years ago. And the way I'm thinking 2 years from now will be dramatically different than the way I'm thinking now. I've always been that way. People who've known me when I was a kid said I was that way. Even I just never liked status quo. So the board is very concerned about preserving. So the fact that the podcasts are recorded record and transcripts and so forth. I've been presenting at the last few and for the next few board meetings, our presentations, just kind of going through the whole ethical, bioethical Christian perspective on things so that it gets down and those meetings are recorded and so forth so that if God decides to take me soon, we got a record of that. Along that same line, our debunk series that we've been doing. Those of you who get our email service, LifeWire, Casey, our creative content director, she came up with this idea. Why don't we just take the worst statements made about the issues we talk about and debunk them, address them. And so I've been writing on it. It's been quite popular. We just received a request that we try to convert it into some Bible study material and so forth. So we're going to see it. We're going to compile them into booklets. We've got the booklet already put together on the debunk series on abortion. We're working on it on assisted suicide, and I'm ramping up the series on gender issues. And we're going to go into relationship issues is the next debunk series. So we're trying to put that all together, and then AI. And those of you who've listened to the podcast in the past know that I'm aware of the dangers of AI. I am worried about some of the directions we go, but I love AI. If you are aware that even AI has a bias, you can be prepared for it. But we're going to be integrating AI into the CLR website. Krista, when you said when you first became involved as a volunteer, you said, there's thousands of articles on our website, and that's the shrunk down website. And
yeah,
because our old website had many more articles than that. And there's going to be a new website launched within the next, hopefully by September. We're going to have a new website launched, a new interface. It's going to look different. But then we also are going to integrate AI so that instead of going, I'm thinking about surrogate parenting. I'm thinking about IVF. I'm thinking about abortion, thinking about birth control. You might not know the key words to search for it, but you might just come to the website and say, my spouse has been diagnosed with a type of cancer and I don't even know what it is. And I don't know what the Christian attitude should be on it. You can ramble on like that in an AI text box, and it will sort out what you're really trying to say and then point you to the articles. And we figured that's going to be a great help to people when they come to our website.
We've talked about a lot of different things, and sometimes, like with looking to the future, I mean, I always think too, there just is good comfort, I guess, in just knowing that God has the future. And, and anything else maybe that we can just encourage our listeners to maybe ponder, think about from a biblical perspective when thinking about the future.
God is in control. That's a main thing. Who is God? He's almighty. He's always working things out for the good of his people. He has a plan, and he's sticking to it. Nothing is impossible for him. We have access to him through prayer. We have God's perfect wisdom readily available to us in the Bible. We have baptism in the Lord's Supper to give us confidence and strength for whatever struggles or challenges we might face or suffering that we might have to endure. And I guess the lesson from recently past, well, I guess we're still in the Easter season, but, can also go all the way to the end of the Bible and the end of time with the book of Revelation. Winning. Jesus won. Jesus wins. Jesus will always win today and tomorrow just as much as he beat sin, death, and Satan at the cross and with his empty tomb. And his victory over sin, death, and Satan has been given to us as our own. Even when it might feel like we're losing in battle against the culture or politics or science or whatever, that's not who we are. We're not losers. And if it feels like we're being persecuted, we're not victims. We're victors because Christ has made us so. So that does away with pessimism. That does away with despair. We're on the winning side. No matter how things seem to be going in the moment, we're on the winning side because Jesus has made us his own. And as long as we cling to him and his cross, we're in good shape and we're prepared for whatever comes. There's still work to be done. Jesus said we must work while it is day. It is day now. It's not night yet. There's things to be done, but we can be confident and comforted in the meantime.
Well, in that regard, one of the changes that I've seen, in the years I've been here is volunteerism is a struggle. CLR, when we began in the 70s and 80s, when we formed the national organization in 83, we were like the premier volunteer organization. All of our affiliates were run by volunteers. We had, corps of volunteers. People were showing up close to 1,000 for convention to get involved. Even though we'd like to think that maybe other people are becoming more worldly, but I'm not, we all have found other things to do than, thinking more of others than of ourselves and so forth. And so one of the changes that we made at CLR in the last couple of years is we brought Rachel Greiner on board, and Rachel's job is basically the bridge ministry part. So we're looking at new beginnings. Right now, our home for mothers is full. We just accepted a resident that we can't take last night. Just accepted a resident we can't take because we have no room. And we are going to be, it looks like we're closing on the sale of a gift of property that was given to New Beginnings. That closing will be taking place in a week. And when that happens, we're going to relaunch the capital campaign. We got to get the new building built so that we can handle more mothers, but we could always use more volunteers. Meanwhile, and Rachel will be overlooking, that part. We have a staff at New Beginnings, but Rachel's in charge of our bridge ministry. And then we've got the program where we send out care boxes to people who have had miscarriages. to show that there's a support group behind them. We're looking at starting to strengthen our affiliates and the pregnancy care work that they're doing in those affiliates. We're looking very strongly at elder care, specifically indigent elder care, the people who cannot afford the couple $100,000 in the bank account so that they can, live in some of the commercial elder care environments that we have today. So we're trying to look at filling these gaps, but it is going to require Christians to, challenge themselves and say, can I support it, financially support it? Can I support it with my time? Can I volunteer? And we're going to try to design some programs that can be done on the congregational level. So maybe you can't afford to build your own home for mothers and take care of single mothers and have them in a program for up to 4 or 5 years. But maybe you can have something in your congregation that goes above and beyond just wringing our hands over the bad situation that it is, and doing something positive. So when we look to the future, we're, even though we're going to have problems, even though we're going to be persecuted, there's going to be defeats. The assignment given to us is that the way we honor and glorify God is we love others as we know God has loved us.
Yeah. Thank you both for everything that we've discussed here today. And we thank all of our listeners too, and the many listeners too that have supported Christian Life Resources over the years. We thank you especially as well. And just a reminder, and I think Bob, just touched on this too, but all of our episodes now, we do have transcripts for. And so if you are interested in getting a transcript of any of these episodes, please reach out to us. You can reach us through lifechallenges.us. There's a place for comments there, and we'd be happy to send you a transcript of the episodes. We thank all of you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're sure you have questions on today's topic or other life issues. Our goal is to help you through these tough topics, and we want you to know we're here to help. You can submit your questions as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. In addition to the podcasts, we include other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so be sure to check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.